Hello. If you are someone who has who wants my Laxum for the hot swap ability of it, then you got to get good. Get good at soldering. My 6-year-old son was helping me out with diode bending and inserting into the board, and did a lot of work with that. And I was showing him what happened afterwards with the soldering process. He was like, "Can I solder some?" It's like, we're gonna observe safety rules and you're gonna wear safety glasses and stuff, but yeah, maybe. Kind of gave him a quick rundown on how to solder, the things you have to think about before you touch the soldering iron to two parts. And initially, well, that's true. At first, he was just feeding the solder, so I was holding the iron in place. And then he would feed the solder the right amount, and then stop. And then he did some soldering on his own, holding the soldering iron and holding the solder and putting things together. And he did a great job. I think about this, and I think it is the same with a lot of things. Like, people just kind of get a mental block about it, and I've said this before, I don't know how to not solder at this point. And that's probably because it took me literally years to learn how to solder, because I was terrible at it. I did not understand what was going on. Now that I know a bit more, it probably had more to do with my tip being oxidized, being in nasty shape. I didn't really understand exactly what I was messing around with. And when the solder doesn't stick to your tip, it's like, okay, well, what am I doing here? Like, how does this even work? I'm clearly doing something wrong. So, the conditions were good, and there were a few instances where he got some cold joints, and we got to learn about those. But he's pretty far ahead of me at this point. If I had learned to solder when I was like in my late 20s, and he's already got it. That fine dexterity. Plus, like, oh my goodness gracious. So since the Rona, people have been, in our area, instead of having birthday parties, people have been having these yard signs that are just giant, like 3-foot by 1-foot letters, and they would spell things out. And the happy birthday, Henry, turning happy 8th, whatever. And that just said, "Lordy, lordy, some name is 40," and it had vultures on it, which is just fantastic. That's terrible, really, but. And vultures, you're not about to die at 40. In this economy, you've got like 30 more years of work ahead of you. Must maintain profitability. Retirement is unprofitable, sir. Right, so... right, so he's soldering stuff, and he put together the... one of the test Laxum builds I have. So, I've been holding off on... this is kind of weird, but... been holding off on testing the Laxum yet. I haven't gotten it complete. I've actually taken it together, put it together, and taken it apart multiple times, because I kind of did it on accident. It's like, oh yeah, I got to build that, and I assemble it, and I'm like, wait, I'm not building it because I'm doing this first. Okay, stop, go back. So the paddles, it needs the layout is different than the Signum 3.0 and 3.1, which I don't know. It probably shouldn't be. But it is, so I don't know. So I needed to redo the paddles, and in redoing the paddles, I have like a to-do list of things to do with the paddles. And instead of just make a paddle triad that works on this new board, I was making significant updates and upgrades. So now the code's a lot cleaner for the paddle generator, the OpenSCAD escad paddle generator, the emacs escad. Oh my! So it also has the fall forward prevention thingy, which was easy enough. You just you populate a quarter of the circle of the axle, and you give the paddle, instead of a circular axle, you give it a half moon axle. So then it fits in one way and doesn't fall forward and only falls one way. So it's good. And I just grabbed the fitting for it, tested it out. It's pretty good. I might increase the axle size a little bit because you're losing half the rigidity really. But it's also not like you're cranking on those paddles. They're not load bearing pieces of load bearing functional pieces. Yeah, carrying the keyboard around, flapping it while holding onto the paddle. At least I hope you're not. You're not supposed to do that. But the paddle flop is gone. Rip. I have discovered the way to get me to do something is to make it inconvenient to me until I just get frustrated enough that I just take care of it. I finally just sit down and do it. So those the new paddles with the new non-tilt, non-forward tipping, whatever thingies, should be up pretty soon. I do want to test them out on this board first, but I'm going to test out a bunch of stuff at the same time. For Laxum though, if you are planning on doing if you're planning on doing a grid hot swap, or if you're planning on doing a low profile build on it, or just a regular 3.1 technically, if you just want a white Signum 3.1, it would work just fine. This might be ready. I'll have to put together a list of maybes and then send it out to the people who who held their place in line. I have this I was buying the filament from American resellers, and they had a limited selection of color for the PLA Plus that I wanted. So with those limitations in mind, I wound up with regular gray, which is kind of normal, a dark blue, which I don't think I've ever had before, a hot, like a bright yellow, and then a pink. So, and I had the opportunity to load up the pink or the yellow, and I was like, I kind of don't want to do the pink. I guess I'll just put on the yellow. YOLO. And then after I put it in, I just come up with like the yellow looks kind of nice. Like printing stuff with it is like, oh, this isn't too bad. And then like this boy, the Mountain Dew cover. The Mountain Dew cover needed to be yellow because the previous one was gray, and the previous one has a hole for the LED to shine through because gray does not let the LED, it blocks the light entirely. Yellow, however, lights up perfectly. So if you put that on it, it doesn't even need to have a hole for the LED to shine through. The whole section of the unit just lights up orange, which is pretty cool. So I had to do that in yellow and make a few of those. So if you've got a Mountain Dew shield 3D printed to cover your MCU, and it doesn't have and it has an LED hole, I'd recommend getting a different one. Get one in a lighter color that does not have the hole. Oh, so other big news. I have that new system, that new Ryzen system set up. Kind of. It's kind of in a testing phase And there's a few tests I want to do. You can actually do OpenSCAD tests on it. But while I was just working in OpenSCAD, and to an extent in Emacs, it was noticeably faster. Even just like the rendering. I said that I didn't come up against speed constraints with my old box, and as far as OpenSCAD is concerned, that is not true. Because I would get weird problems with the previews. The previews would show up weird, generate weird, and then sometimes you kind of have to do a what's it called? A complete render of it. And when you do the complete render, it calculates everything, so it takes a while. And I had some commission work that would take like 30 minutes to render, and this is I think the last time it rendered in about a fifth of the time. I haven't done like a proper test on it. There's actually part of the Pharos test suite includes OpenSCAD calculations. So running one of those and really getting a proper benchmark on the two systems would be pretty interesting, because OpenSCAD really is something I do a lot of work in. Yeah. So one of the quirks of OpenSCAD is when you do transforms, depending on how far nested in the transform is, it may be affected. It's likely affected by any rotation that you apply above that transform. So if I say make this go higher, but I had already rotated it 90 degrees, well, now it's going higher on the z-axis, but technically you already rotated it 90 degrees, so now it's going higher on the x-axis, or further on the x-axis. So you run into this interesting situation where you're like, okay, I just need to do one little transform here. Like, we'll just move it over a little bit. Okay. And you're deeply nested in whatever. And you know that one of the directions of one of the axes is going to give you the movement that you want, but you don't know which one. So in the Emacs escad, forgot about that. In the Emacs escad, it's not too hard because you're in Emacs and it's easy to, change one axis value and then invert it, and then change the other one and change the other one and invert that one, because that's the final one. But since I do have an Emacs escad shorthand language, and I do have my input entirely in Emacs, why not just make some commands for adjusting those numbers? Make some kind of thing that get into some kind of axis mode, where it takes the three numbers of the axes and then puts the cursor on one of them, and then you press up and down, and it increments higher or lower, and you press right and it flips to the next number, and you can increment higher and lower with instant feedback and instant output. So then you get into that testing mode, essentially, and then you can just kind of modify things however you like, immediately with immediate feedback. And that actually that would solve one of the issues that I've had with escad, is you don't have any kind of immediate feedback. I can't click on an item and say, all right, item, I want you to extend this way and stretch this way, from my perspective, because that's what you get in more of an interactive CAD program. You get to grab surfaces and say, all right, pull this surface this way or stretch this surface higher, that kind of thing. You don't really get that in escad because everything's numerical values. But with Emacs, all of my inputs going into Emacs, and all of the output is what's generating, what's showing up in OpenSCAD. So that's easy enough. You can script any of this. My annoyance with Emacs at the text editing tasks has led me to think about, what are there better alternatives? I'm not really getting off of Emacs yet, but just for the text editing, I mean, like, obviously, yes. So the other thing is I do a lot of remote work, so Emacs has the ability to keep bookmarks of all those locations through Tramp SSH connections. So it's really easy to be like, open that file, and that file is on another box that's tunneled through another box, and Emacs is just like, okay, and zips on over. It's something I would have to SSH into another box and then SSH into that box and then open the file and work with the file. And instead, Emacs grabs a snapshot of the file, brings it local, and lets me tweak it. And then when I finish it, it pushes it back up the pipe. So I don't have to worry about like weird environment stuff. But there's also instances where I need to know what the environment is. So it's like a funky version of PHP running over there, and I don't have it running locally or not in exactly the same setup. So it is best tested over there. So I don't know. It's a little weird, but I'm thinking about this stuff. But like the Emacs escad language, that would probably be better written in, technically Perl might be better at it, but Python or something like that, because it is just text transforms technically with some additional logic. But I mean, I did it in elisp because it was fun. So I did it because it was fun and I wanted to, because I felt like it. And it is kind of cool. It still complains at me though, and Emacs doesn't enjoy the levels of recursion that are required. And that's probably because Emacs doesn't enjoy the level of recursions that are required. All right.